Aaron Pico entered 2019 with a record of 4-1. And his most recent fight was this past weekend, and now he is 4-3 with his last two losses, his last two fights ending in devastating knockout fashion. The most recent one being a crazy flying knee knockout, in which prior to that knockout, prior to that flying knee, Aaron Pico was absolutely dominating the fight, doing whatever he wanted to. The problem was he was very one-dimensional, and that is the exact same problem he had with his previous fight, his previous loss against Henry Corrales. He was way too one-dimensional. I thought he was dominating that fight too, definitely getting the better of the exchanges, and then prior to that fight he had fallen in love with body shots, fallen in love with the liver shot. He throws very hard shots to the body. He'd finished a couple fighters with that same shot, and he kept throwing that same shot over and over and over again against Henry Corrales. He was telegraphing it. Henry Corrales knew exactly what he was going to do. He capitalized on it. He threw a shot over the top, and it knocked Aaron Pico out because Aaron Pico was only focusing on one thing. He was just trying to finish the fight via knockout or via TKO with a shot to the body. He wasn't even throwing too many shots upstairs. He was not mixing in any grappling whatsoever, not threatening Henry Corrales with any takedowns, although it is well known that Aaron Pico has amazing wrestling credentials. So yeah, there was no threat of takedown, and there wasn't much of a threat of anything aside from that body shot, the right hook that he kept throwing to the body over and over again. And Henry Corrales picked up on that, and like I said, he knocked him out because Aaron Pico was so predictable. With that said, Henry Corrales is a beast himself. He's a former title challenger in Bellator, and he has a record of 17-3. So he has a lot more experience than Aaron Pico. He's no slouch, great fighter himself, so there's no shame in losing that fight. So what does Aaron Pico do next? You would think after losing a fight like that, it was a pretty rough knockout. You'd think he would take some time, give his body a rest, maybe switch gyms, switch camps, and try to implement his wrestling more as well as his striking, because it's also a well-known fact that he has very good boxing. He's trained with Freddie Roach in the past. He was a former Golden Gloves champion, and we've seen his striking on display in Bellator so far. We just haven't seen his wrestling and his striking mixed in any fight to date, which is unfortunate because the dude's got all the talent in the world. He's got all the tools in his toolbox that he needs to be a dominant champion, but so far he hasn't really warmed up to the mixed part of mixed martial arts too well. So, coming off that rough KO loss to Henry Corrales, like I said, you'd think he would take some time, which he did. He took a little bit of time off. He did switch camps. He went over to Jackson's MMA, the home of John Jones, which is well known for their grappling or wrestling heavy game plans. They've been called a little bit boring in the past because they definitely formulate game plans that are a little on the safer side. They like to control the fight. A lot of their fighters are very good wrestlers, and they like to take the fight to the ground and kind of, like I said, play it safe. So I didn't think that was a bad thing at all for Aaron Pico. I thought it was a good decision because he's taken a bit of damage in his career so far, especially in that last fight, and he's only 22 years old, so he has a ton of time ahead of him. Like I said, he's got all the talent in the world, all the talent he needs. He just needs someone to help him mix all those talents together and be able to implement them in the same fight. So I thought Greg Jackson's was a pretty good place to do that, but accepting a fight against Adam Borics, who was an extremely talented prospect himself and with a record of 12 wins and 0 losses, not sure that was the smartest thing in the world, especially in hindsight. But that's what happened. Aaron Pico he's certainly not afraid of any challenges. There's no doubt about that. All of his fights have been against opponents that have a lot more experience than him, and they all have good records too. He's not fighting any bums, he's not fighting any cans, he's fighting talented dudes. And Aaron Pico just now, counting his most recent fight, he only has 7 professional fights with 0 amateur MMA fights. With all of that said, he still looked great in the first round of his most recent fight against Adam the Kid Borics. He finally started showing us some of his wrestling, actually probably a little bit too much wrestling. That's what I was kind of worried about when I heard that he was going to Jackson's. Like I said, they like to implement very wrestling or grappling heavy game plans, and that's pretty much all he did the first round. He was taking Adam down at will, having his way with him in the grappling department, pretty much taking him down whenever he wanted to. He wasn't really landing any heavy ground and pound. He didn't threaten with any submissions, but he controlled where he wanted the fight to go and when it went there. So he dominated the first round. I don't know how many takedowns he ended up landing, but pretty much every time he shot for a takedown, he completed it. And the second round was kind of going the same way. The problem was he was too predictable. Just like his previous loss against Henry Corrales, he was way too predictable. He kept spamming takedown over and over and over again. And although he was landing and completing these takedowns, Adam knew what to expect. He was just waiting and waiting and waiting for his opening. He did a great job of getting up once he was taken down. I thought Aaron Pico looked like he was starting to gas a little bit in the second round. And I think he was getting a little bit lazy with his shots. He was not mixing in his strikes at all. Up to that point, when the fight ended, he'd barely thrown any strikes at all on the feet. And like I said, he has great boxing. He has a ton of power. He's shown that in previous fights. So it's very frustrating to see him only stick with one or the other. It's like he's either always striking, or he's, in his most recent fight, he was only always wrestling. If he can mix those two together, I still believe he can be an extremely dominant champion for a long time into the future. But right now, it's just a frustrating thing to watch. In that second round, it was a lot of the same. At the beginning of the round, he was taking Adam down, and then eventually Adam got up and looked like Aaron Pico was about to shoot for another takedown, but once again, he didn't mix it in with strikes. It was way too predictable. Adam saw that he was about to shoot. He threw a beautifully, very well-placed flying knee and pretty much knocked Aaron Pico out. I mean, it looked like his lights went out before he hit the ground. He was still somewhat, once he hit the ground, maybe he woke up, or maybe he wasn't quite all the way out. So he was somewhat trying to defend himself, but I think the ref did a great job calling the fight. I think it was pretty much over at that point. And, man, it was just frustrating and hard to watch. Aaron Pico, like I keep saying, he's just got so much talent. He seems like such a nice kid. He's only 22. He's one of the best young wrestlers in the U.S. His wrestling credentials are amazing. He has great boxing credentials. He has a ton of power, which isn't exactly common for that weight class. And he just has all the skills. He has all the tools he needs, but he's just, for whatever reason, up to this point, he hasn't been able to mix them together. So I don't know where he goes from here. I want to see the kid succeed. I keep saying this. I think he can be really dominant. It's just tough to watch. At this point, honestly, I think he needs to take a lot of time off. Give his body a chance to recover, because unfortunately now he's suffered 2 devastating knockouts in a row. And like I said, he's only 22. You don't want to give yourself CTE at a young age. I mean, you never want to give yourself CTE, but you definitely don't want to derail and completely ruin your career before it even gets a chance to get started, because you're taking some early losses that you probably shouldn't be taking. I think he definitely, although he is hanging with these guys, and at points during the fight, these incredible fighters, he's dominating them. This dude was 12-0 prior to the Aaron Pico fight. The guy before that, Henry Corrales, like I said, he had an amazing record as well. These guys have so much experience, and Aaron Pico was still having his way with both of them. But he just became too predictable, and he got finished because of it. I think he should take a step back in competition. I think he should take a lot of time off to let his body recover. In the meantime, I don't know, I guess maybe give Jackson's another shot, work a little more with them. They have produced a lot of great champions. They know what they're doing. He just needs to work on mixing the striking and the grappling so he's not predictable, and so his opponent cannot take advantage of him being that predictable. I think if he takes the necessary time off, I think if he learns to mix his grappling and his striking and implement that in the same fight and learn to become more unpredictable, I think, like I say, he has all the skills. He has everything he needs to be successful. I just don't want to see him keep taking these rough losses that I don't think he should be taking this early in his career. I think he's too talented. I think his career up until this point has just been severely mismanaged. I know the kid has all the confidence in the world in himself, clearly, otherwise he wouldn't be accepting these fights. But I think it's time to take a step back in competition, maybe fight some cans, or at least guys that have a lot less experience. Dominate those guys, get some dominant performances, get your confidence back, get some more cage time, get more chance to implement new game plans, get a chance to get more comfortable mixing up your grappling and your striking. And once you get a couple more fights in, once you starts to become second nature, that you're just effortlessly switching from grappling to striking, and you're not allowing your opponents to pick up on any cues or any tendencies, then I think will be the point to resume fighting these opponents like an Adam Borax or a Henry Corrales. Maybe even have rematches with him later down the road. But right now, I think it's too early. I think he should take a step back and get his career back on track before it is knocked completely off the rails. Super frustrating. I think the kid still has a very bright future. Like I said, I think his career has been very mismanaged so far. And I really hope he takes a step back in competition. I really hope he takes a good amount of time off, and I really hope he just works on mixing up his skills. Anyways, guys, that's all I'm going to say about Aaron Pico for now. If I was his manager, if I was his coaches, that is the kind of stuff I would tell him. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you were his manager, if you were his coach, what would you tell him? What do you think is the next logical step for Aaron Pico in his career?
Oh my goodness! Oh my God! Just like that! That is some serious power! Wow!